Hey there, blessed greetings, friend. This is Pastor Vince, and I just wanted to spend a little time with you just to share my experiences as a chaplain versus being a pastor. From 2016 to 2017, I served as a hospital chaplain with one of the major healthcare systems here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had been a seminary student. I started as a seminary student actually in January of 2013. I finished my degree. I technically finished my degree the end of 2017, and then I would walk and walk across the stage and have my degree in hand in May of 2018, at which time I was 50 years old. So I completed my degree at 49, 50 years old. But while I was serving as a hospital chaplain from 2016 to 2017, I was also working full time within the same healthcare system. So I was already working full time as a medical assistant in the same healthcare system, but at a different campus within the system. So oftentimes what I would do is, at least while I was doing my internship, I was working my regular 8 to 4, because that was my hours, 8 to 4, at a different campus. I was working with cancer patients, with outpatient cancer patients. It was an outpatient facility for cancer patients. I was working 8 to 4. I would run home, shower, change, whatever. Then I would drive to the main campus in Uptown Charlotte and do my time as a hospital chaplain intern. So there was time in the classroom, but most times I was pulling my full shifts as the chaplain on duty overnight. So I worked overnight as a hospital chaplain from roughly 6 p.m. By the time I got off my regular job at 4 o'clock, I had time to run home to my apartment, change and everything. And luckily, my apartment was equidistant between my regular job and the other campus where I did my internship. So it was not right in between, but you get what I'm saying. It was equidistant or in the middle of the two sites to where I was able to run home from my regular job and then head in the other direction to the main campus and do my time as a hospital chaplain intern. And so, as I said, I did that for about 6 months while I was doing my internship. And that experience was very fulfilling, very rewarding. It gave me an opportunity to minister to patients from a different perspective, through a different lens. As I said, as a chaplain versus as a pastor. Now, there are some similarities to being a pastor and being a chaplain, but a lot of people don't understand that the approaches to ministry, I'll say it that way, the approach or the approaches to ministry are different for a chaplain than they are for a pastor. And that's generally speaking. And I can say that with confidence because not only do I have the real world practical experience as a chaplain and as a pastor, I also did my master's thesis on chaplaincy. So not saying I'm an expert in the field, I'm just saying I have that to support what I'm saying. You may be a pastor, you may be a chaplain saying, you're listening to this right now saying, hey, that's not true. Hey, I'm a chaplain or I'm a pastor or I'm both. And these were my experiences. Okay, brother. Okay, sister. Those were your experiences. I'm not going to take away from what you experienced, but I'm just saying from what I experienced, from what I've learned, the approaches to ministry for a chaplain and for a pastor are generally different. Okay, I'm not going to, get into that discussion because that's a whole lesson in itself. But from my personal experiences as a hospital chaplain, I had to learn to switch roles because I already said I was working full-time within the same system. I was actually working as a medical assistant, providing direct medical care to patients. But then as a hospital chaplain, now it's taking care of patients spiritually. There were times where I was in situations where, for example, I was called to a medical emergency. A patient was having a medical emergency. I'll just say it that way. They called me as the chaplain, to be there to support the patient or the family or even the staff. A lot of people don't understand that chaplains are also there to support the staff. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a hospital chaplain. You could be a prison in the prison system, or, there's many different types of chaplains, but you're also there to support the staff. So I was there for anyone who needed my, my assistance. They needed me to be present, what have you. But I had to almost literally force myself not to jump in because this patient was having a medical emergency. And with my training and background and whatever, part of me wanted to jump in and help. But no, I had to tell myself, no, you're not in that role right now. You were in that role earlier today. From 8 to 4, you were in that role. But now you are in a different role. Just, stay out of the way. Let them do what they need to do. And if they need you to provide, spiritual care, the things that you're trained to do in this role, then you're here. So I would say that was the one challenge I had working in the hospital setting, because as I said, I was already working within the system doing providing medical care, but now I'm providing spiritual care. I met so many different types of patients. I was there to, as we say, to journey along with the patients, to, with their families, to pray with them, to counsel them, if you will. And that's another thing I'll say about chaplains. Our training is basically to be spiritual counselors or to be counselors, not licensed professionals. I want to make that distinction. I want to make that clear. We are not licensed professional counselors. We're not therapists. We're not there to diagnose or to treat anything. We are there to, as I said, to provide support, spiritual support, mental health support, what have you, to the patient, their families, to the staff, but we are not there to treat or to diagnose anyone. If that's the case, then we would refer them or, to someone like a licensed professional therapist. So I just wanted to make that clear. Our training is to be, to be counselors, spiritual counselors, or I don't know if I should say biblical counselors, because it depends on the situation. If I'm a Christian chaplain and I'm ministering to a Christian patient, and I'm saying patient as if I'm in the hospital setting or the medical setting, if I'm ministering to a Christian patient, I would provide some spiritual counseling, some Christian spiritual counseling, biblical counseling, what have you. But again, I'm not diagnosing, I'm not treating anything. That's for a licensed professional, mental health therapist, whatever. But with that being said, I was able to provide care as I had been trained to do, as I had been called to do, and I was able to provide that. God provided that experience for me as a hospital chaplain. Later, I would serve as a police chaplain with the police department here in Charlotte, the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department, to be exact. I served there from 2019. At this point, I'm already out of seminary. I had already started Sacrificial Lamb Ministries back in 2016. So now I'm serving as a police chaplain for a few years. As a matter of fact, I remember, I remember joining the team before COVID hit. This was early 2019, I think. Early 2019, COVID had not officially been declared yet or whatever. So, and then now during COVID, we're pretty stagnant. We're not allowed to really do anything. But then once we were coming out of COVID, once our society was coming out of COVID, now we're able to be active, to do what we were called to do. So I just wanted to share those experiences with you really quick. My experiences as a hospital chaplain and my experiences as a police chaplain. Two different types of chaplains, two different types of communities that we are serving, or that I was serving, I should say. I served two different types of communities, two different approaches to ministry. As I said, generally speaking, now it depends on what community you're serving or whatever, what organization you're attached to. But the approaches to ministry are different for a chaplain than they are for a pastor, generally speaking. And I was fortunate to have, or to currently have, both experiences. I have experiences as a chaplain and as a pastor. And as I continue to build Sacrificial Lamb Ministries into a mental health focused organization, I am incorporating my experiences as a pastor and as a chaplain focused on mental health support within specific communities. As you can read, if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can go to the description and you can read a little bit about my background and what this and what Sacrificial Lamb Ministries is all about. And as a matter of fact, there's also an episode. I just uploaded a recording before this one called Hi. It's called Hi, My Name Is a Little Bit or A Little About Me. And that's where I get into who I am, what this organization's about, so forth and so on. So yeah, with those experiences, I'm now able to restructure and incorporate what I've learned thus far into restructuring Sacrificial Lamb Ministries into a mental health focused organization, serving various communities. So thanks for listening. Please continue to stay plugged into this podcast and to learn more about Sacrificial Lamb Ministries. Be blessed.